Today we have Alphonso David, the president and CEO of the Global Black Economic Forum. Man, how you doing today?
I'm good. I'm good. How are you?
Doing well, doing well. Just preparing. Big week coming up. We have Essence Fest. You know, it's like one of the biggest weeks during the summertime in New Orleans, and a lot of people locally don't really know what y'all do, man. Y'all done a lot, all throughout the years at Essence. So, if you don't mind, just give me a little history on how you got involved in the forum. What's the root cause of its creation, and how y'all plan to impact Essence.
Well, thank you. Thank you. So for folks who may not know, my name is Alphonso David. I'm the CEO, Chief Executive Officer of the Global Black Economic Forum. So I'm a civil rights lawyer. I've been practicing law for more than 25 years. I've done everything from economic development work to criminal justice to civil rights. I've worked in the public sector, the private sector, as well as the non-for-profit sector.
Wow.
And I took over the Global Black Economic Forum a few years ago. The Global Black Economic Forum is a global enterprise that focuses on economic opportunity for marginalized communities with a really fine, specific focus on the Black diaspora. What do I mean by that? What we're looking at is how do we break down the silos that have existed for decades that make it difficult for people of color and specifically members of the Black diaspora to succeed economically in so many other parts of the globe. When we're looking at the US, we have systems that have been created that strategically and systematically deny economic opportunities to Black people, where we are in many cases fighting up against the grain. And so the Global Black Economic Forum's role here is to how do we break down those silos? How do we identify opportunities and solutions in a new pathway? So we've been talking about equity for a very long time. We've been talking about equality for a very long time.
Right.
What we're looking at is how do we develop new models? How do we develop new systems to get us to that place that we call equity, that we call equality, that we call liberation? And so we're doing that variety of ways. We have events. One of the most significant events that we participate in is at the Essence Festival of Culture. We have a business summit as well as a public convention. We have more space in the convention center than any other group. We have 60,000 square feet of space. And within that space, we bring in world leaders, policymakers, politicians, celebrities to really address some of the most difficult and complex issues that we confront. And we're looking at the future of work, the future of wealth, the future of health, and the future of democracy. Those are our four pillars, and we address those issues through events. We also have a leadership development company that works with companies and entrepreneurs. We can do coaching, we can do institutional assessments, we can do talent innovation and pipeline work, and we work with companies. And then the final piece is we do policy work and litigation. Some people may know that we represented the Fearless Fund along with the legal team in federal court. This is a venture capital company that was sued. Two women sued for providing grants to other people of color. And we defended them successfully in federal court. So that gives you a general sense of what we do. We do events, we have a leadership development company, and we do policy work. And our four pillars are the future of work, the future of wealth, the future of health, and the future of democracy. And we're focusing on what does the future look like, as opposed to focusing on where we came from, some of the challenges that we face today, getting all of us engaged with how do we reimagine what a future could look like where we get to that place that we call equity.
That's powerful. That's really powerful, man. And like I was telling you off camera, man, I went to Tuskegee University. I got a degree in political science, so definitely heavily involved in policy, in the Black advancement, and just figuring out ways for us to gain an economic foothold. And that's one of the reasons why I went into media, just trying to help take back some of these information airways that have been so diluted by information that has been detrimental to our communities. So in light of the recent election, a lot of things has been shifting. What has the forum done last year, and how are y'all kind of transitioning to this new leadership and a lot of the different hurdles that I know y'all have been dealing with since things kind of changed up?
So we have been focused on, prior to the election and post-election, on awareness, on education, and on addressing misinformation. So, we as a community are disincentivized to engage in the election process. If you look all around the country, and specifically in many parts of the South, they make it more difficult for us to vote. They pass laws and regulations that make it much more difficult for people to exercise their constitutional right to vote. They close down polling stations that are in Black neighborhoods. They redraw the lines so that when you vote, your vote is diluted. And so a part of what we're doing is making sure that we're educating people about the challenges that we face and how we can overcome those challenges. So we did a series called Paint the Polls last year during the election season. We did 10 episodes. We had more than 200,000 people watching one of our episodes, the first one, I believe, where we had Jasmine Crockett and other folks that came on to sort of debunk some of the myths that exist and make sure that people understood the challenges as well as the opportunities that are presented to us. One of the other areas we have been focused on is misinformation. It's fascinating to me that when we think about news or we think about information, we all get it from different sources.
Yep.
But I think what has become more complex is whether or not that information is true. And we sometimes get information and we don't know whether or not it's true.
Especially
because we
AI stuff. Yeah.
Exactly. We just don't know. And so a part of that is trying to provide people with information so they can decipher information from misinformation and disinformation. In fact, at this year's festival, we're going to be hosting a panel that's focused exclusively on that. How do you decipher information and disinformation? Which sources could you rely on, and which sources should you be questionable? Should you be viewing through a questionable lens? And that is incredibly important because we can't just think about one election season.
Yep.
We can't just think about the presidency, right? We have elections every single year. Even though, Donald Trump is now the president this year, or was elected last year, but is now in the White House, it doesn't mean we don't have any elections this year. In fact, we just had an election yesterday in New York City. So we have to think about elected offices and how they impact our personal lives. And sometimes there is a disconnect between someone in office and whether or not it's actually affecting our lives. Think about local government, whether or not your trash is getting picked up on time, whether or not you're getting resources to your local schools, whether or not they're really addressing issues of poverty and homelessness. Those are issues that local governments address. Those are not necessarily issues that the president is focused on. So if we want to affect our communities, we have to think about how do we actively engage in a way that can change the landscape where we live. And that is a lot of what we're doing at the Global Black Economic Forum, providing information, also addressing misinformation, and really hopefully empowering people to take a more active role in their democracy.
And I really like y'all approach because y'all taking the boots on the ground approach. Y'all doing events. So we're going to get credible people. We're going to actually put them there in person and get them to actually speak to you about a lot of these issues. And to your point about the misinformation, is just so much floating around. So I really commend y'all for that. And we're going to talk about a little bit about what y'all did at past forums. But I do want to propose the question of what does Black economic power in 2025 look like to you, like beyond representation? Because y'all doing that work. Yeah, man, I'm hit you with some good questions, man.
For me, that is such a great question, and it's such a complex answer that I'm going to give you. I'll try to break it down into the different categories that I see. For me, Black economic power at the first instance is us recognizing that we have power.
Power recognition.
Recognizing the power that we have as a demographic, we spend an extraordinary amount of money buying services and products. If we are mindful and intentional about where we're buying those products, who we're buying those products from, we can demonstrate our power in a way that we're not currently doing. So that would be first, just recognizing our power. The second is reinvesting in our communities. So when we think about where we buy our products, where we buy our services, are we really intentional about who we're buying it from?
Mm.
And whether or not those folks are actually reinvesting in our communities. I mean, these are simple things that if all of us did that, it would demonstrate to the rest of the world how economic power can really be exercised. And I think that, not only focusing on the recognition of the power, but how we exercise the power are the two big pillars for me. Because look, when we think about economic power, for a lot of people, they think about, how much money and assets can I generate to be self-sustainable. So how do I get to a point where I'm a millionaire? I got it. That's an understandable framework. But if we're not thinking about the community around us, then we can never sustain our economic power. So we have shifted in this country from the power of the community to the power of the individual, the politics of the community from the politics of the individual. And we have to focus on the politics of the community, because if we think about ourselves and thinking about generating wealth for ourselves without focusing on the community, we will not be able to survive. That power that we are amassing individually is not sustainable, because we have to remember that racism, bias, prejudice, they see through green, right?
Yeah.
If you are being stopped by an officer because of bias, he doesn't really care which country you're from. He doesn't really care if you're making $1 million or 50. So if he's driven by bias and he or she is driven by prejudice, it doesn't matter how much money you're making. So we have to think about accumulating economic wealth through the lens of the power that it will give our community, and not simply the power that we will amass individually.
That's great. And it's funny. I was in Baton Rouge yesterday. One of my homies, Tony Zanders, he just became the new CEO of Nexus Louisiana, which is this economic development arm. It was actually put in by statute in the 80s to create high tech economic development within the state. And he's a brother from New Orleans and just doing great work. And his whole perspective is literally just what you said, is how he's judging his impact based on the impact that he makes within the community. Like, how many technical co-founders does he introduce into the market by 2030? How many local businesses does he use to actually empower and impact these cultures? And before we get into essence, I have one more. What do you think there's a model for us? Like, is there a group of Black people in like a certain demographic or something that we should be kind of modeling behind? I know that everyone has their own individual cultures and whatnot, but is there a group where you just look at it and be like, okay, this is kind of how we need to be positioning ourselves if we want to see that scale of economic opportunity in the Black community?
There are many models. I don't think that there's one model. I think when we think about the economic systems that drive our communities, we have to think about how we operate within those systems. And we also have to think about how we create new models within those systems. So I'll give you an example. If we look at Black people on the continent of Africa versus Black people on the continent of South America, the systems that are being used for building economic power are very different, because the factors that inform the ability to achieve economic power are different. But we can pull many of those models to understand what are the driving forces, if you will. What are the common themes that we're seeing in successful models? And one of them is reinvestment. One of them is really thinking beyond individual benefits and focusing on the community models. We're seeing those models where and we've seen this narrative before, right? Lifting all boats. And if we do that, we're creating a community that's sustainable. If you think you can build $1 million house in a community that is suffering and you will be protected, you're living in a false paradigm.
Yeah.
Like Baldwin says, if you think that, your safety is going to protect you, or your lack of engagement is going to protect you, you're wrong. It's the same concept when we think about the economy. And I appreciate that we live in a capitalist country, but we shouldn't allow that to rob us of our soul.
Right.
And understand that you can still seek benefits for yourself and your family, but do it through the lens of benefiting the community as well, because that model will create a sustainable framework that benefits the entire community. And then we're really talking about true economic power.
That's good. And to get a little bit into past events, so I didn't know about the Global Black Economic Forum last year by name, but I did know it by the panels that y'all had. Y'all had some real all-star. I'm like, I don't know who's put this together, but these dudes know. And then I looked it up. I'm like, okay, Rich Lieutenant's involved. I'm like, okay, this seems like something that's more at the, creme de la creme of Black excellence. And kudos to y'all for putting that together. So let's talk a little bit about some past events and things that y'all have done at previous Essence festivals, and that how y'all plan to transition that into the future ones.
Sure. So we have been very privileged to host world leaders, business leaders, celebrities, academics, philanthropists on our stages over the past several years. We had the Vice President Kamala Harris on our stages for the past 3 years, talking about a variety of things from the election to her faith. We had the former president of Liberia come and present to us about thinking about investing outside of the United States and why that's important for economic growth. We had the United States ambassador to the United Nations come and speak to us about global policy and how, it's important for us to think about global policy as it relates to how we grow individually here or collectively here in the United States. We've had the chief executive officer of Gilead Sciences, one of our major sponsors, who have come to our events for the past 3 years, talking to us, for example, about the importance of diversity on board leadership, right? They have more diverse board members than most companies that I know of. And why is that important? So they came to talk to other business leaders about it's important for us to have a diverse board because we make more money and we're more innovative.
Yeah, it's more effective. Yeah, it's more effective. And it's a shame that we even have to have these conversations. It's like, why do I got to tell you that a more diverse team is going to yield better results?
Yeah. But, sometimes we have to go back to the basics. But they have been a huge supporter of us, Gilead Sciences, and they've come for the past few years. We had the W.K. Kellogg Foundation with Coleman Domingo and Lejeune Montgomery Tebron, who came and talked about, mental health issues and community reinvestment. And they did a number of different panels with us. And what we often try to do each and every year is focus on these 4 pillars, as I referenced before, because this is about creating a future that will be inclusive and equitable. So what does the future of work look like? What does the future of wealth look like? What does the future of health look like? When we think about it in those terms, the future of work, wealth, health, and democracy, we actually understand that we have an active role in creating that future. No one else is creating it for us. We actually are active participants in creating that future. And so that's what we are building each and every year when we put panels on, when we bring speakers to one of the main issues we're focusing on this year is artificial intelligence.
We could double click on that too for a second. Is the AI thing? So when it comes to the AI, so I'm a AI maxi. I used to do a lot of TikToks back in the day, and I would say I'm like an early pioneer when it comes to certain technologies. Like my first TikTok in 2021 was about AI. And I've amassed over 100,000 followers, like educating people on culture and technology and where they intersect. And just the amount of knowledge I see being passed up on our communities and a lot of these tools that aren't being used. And it kind of scares me because it seems like they're kind of trying to erase the middle class, whereas you're either going to have or you're going to not have it. And I'm a really big advocate for making it, just making it more understandable within our communities, because if we leverage these tools, these are the things that are going to essentially democratize a lot of these industries to where small companies can get the tools of like major corporations. But if we don't know how to use these, then we're going to fall victim to them, and it's just going to further the gap between who has and who doesn't have within the community. But how do you feel about AI as it relates to the future of work, for example?
Look, I think we have 2 fundamental questions that we have to ask ourselves. One is, how are you utilizing artificial intelligence to advance your understanding of the marketplace and make sure that you're adequately prepared to level up. The second is, as a community, being mindful of how we engage with artificial intelligence, so it's not really compromising who we are as a people. And both of those questions we are going to be addressing at this year's festival. If you think about it, there are some who are fearful of artificial intelligence. They think, oh, I don't know what that is. I can't touch it. It's it's not something I'm supposed to use, right? And then there's the separate faction or a different faction that says, am I really allowed to use it? Am I cheating if I use it?
Yep.
And look, I don't think AI is the end all be all, if you will,
Right.
old saying. But I do think that if we are not familiar with artificial intelligence, understand how it's being used, understand how we can use it, we will be left behind. I'm not saying that if someone is asking you to complete a project, you use artificial intelligence to complete that project. But artificial intelligence should be used to inform how you do this work. Because there will be things that you will learn using artificial intelligence that you will not learn if you're ignoring it.
Yeah. And it's
look, I mean, automation is going to change. I went to a Whole Foods. I'll give you this example. I went to a Whole Foods a few weeks ago, and there was a long line, and there were a few women of color in their 70s in front of me, and there was no tellers. They looked at me and they were very confused.
Like, I don't work here.
What do I do now? Well, what you do now is you go up to that kiosk and you scan and I had to do this for them.
Wow.
And when we think that is artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
Right? That is a chain store has made a decision that they can be much more efficient. They can save money. It's affecting how many people will be tellers at those stores.
Mm-hmm.
And if we don't pay attention, it will radically transform certain industries.
Yeah. It makes me think of the Industrial Revolution or Agricultural Revolution, right? Like there was a time when people were farming and there was 40 farmers on the farm, right? And then with the invention of these tools, that went from 40 farmers to 3 farmers operating a tool. And a lot of the farmers, they were scared. They're like, okay, we're going to lose jobs. We don't really have no farms left. But what they didn't realize is that the Industrial Revolution would bring on the factory. So it's not as if y'all were going to be put out of work, but it's just that the work was going to change. And that's the same thing we're going through right now. We're moving into this digital revolution, this age of information where information is readily available. That doesn't mean that you're going to not be working. It's just that you're going to have more high value tasks to complete. I actually talked about that in my book that I released. It's called Cyberspace and Politics. And it's really just a collection of papers from Tuskegee where one of my professors, he was like I'm talking a genius, like a guy, rest his soul, he passed away, but one of my best professors, he created the class and he actually wrote the book for the class. And it was basically talking about who will govern the virtual state. And it was all about the tragedy of the commons, when things are not enough to go around, and the virtual space and how cyberspace is going to be sought after by military more than land, air, and sea combined. And those things, it was just so prophetic to how things are transitioning now. But I'm excited about it. I don't think that this is going to bring anything different than what happened when we transitioned from agriculture to industrial. It's just, as you said, we just got to make sure that we're on top of it, and the work that y'all doing is being on the front lines to make sure that our community is informed. And that's amazing, man. And I'm glad y'all doing it in New Orleans. Let's talk a little bit about the switch gears. What y'all doing this year? Like, what's the plan this year? Let's get to it. Yeah, what y'all got planned?
Like preview.
Give me a little sneak peek.
So we have a business summit where we invite business leaders and world leaders from around the world to come in and really try to address some of the most pressing, as I mentioned before, issues for business leaders through the lens of equity, through the lens of equality. Artificial intelligence is one of those issues we're going to be addressing because some business leaders think they're using it. Some business leaders think that we're achieving a level of efficiency and we are much more effective because we're using AI. And we want to probe that question for business leaders about, are you really using it effectively? Are you using it in a way that achieves the level of cost savings that you think you want to achieve? And then importantly, how are you using it ethically to benefit these communities that are going to be disproportionately impacted by it? We're also focusing on our future of health pillar quite a lot this year. So when you think about health, if you're not healthy, you can't vote. You can't really engage civically.
Yeah.
If you're not healthy, you can't really think about generating wealth and becoming a millionaire or a billionaire. If you're not healthy, in many cases, it's difficult to find a job. One of the areas, and within the context of health, that we want to focus on is how do we democratize health and get people to reclaim their health? When we think of health, we often talk about it as this affecting us: colon cancer, fibroids, heart disease, whatever the thing is that's affecting us as people of color or marginalized communities. That's how health issues are often reported about.
Yeah.
Right? What we want to focus on is, as I said, again, the future of health. How do we become more active participants in our health where we can reclaim it? So we have a future of health neighborhood in the convention center this year.
A neighborhood?
A neighborhood where we will do health screenings. We will provide information to folks about their health. We will be able to educate people about artificial intelligence and health. So it's 10,000 square feet of space that we have dedicated to the future of health. What does it look like? How can you engage? How can you get information? There will be medical professionals that will be on the ground within the Global Black Economic Forum in our future of health neighborhood. So that will be a huge part of what we're doing this year. Yeah.
That's crazy. A whole neighborhood. Y'all build a movie session.
Yes. It's
so
going.
Y'all gonna have panels going in there too, or is
Oh yeah. So we have future of health neighborhood. That's about 10,000 square feet of space. We then will have a series of conversations that focuses on, the future of democracy. We have the anniversary of July 4th, right? Every year we get together on July 4th. Well, one of the questions we should start asking ourselves is, what is the true meaning of July 4th? Right? We're going to have health panels that focus on everything from blaming it on the hormones to, for women that have to sort of deal with menopause and fibroids and all of these issues, to we have sports stars that are coming in and talking about how sports can be used as a framework for generating wealth. We have elected officials that are coming in to talk about the current political landscape that we currently live in and what's the answer, what's the solution, what's the path forward. So we will have more than 40 panels over the course of the weekend that will focus on work, wealth, health, and democracy. And I want to encourage folks to come and engage. Those panels will take place between 11 a.m. and 5 p.m. on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday of the July 4th weekend.
And I'm actually moderating one of these panels. I'm doing the one on the 20th, the 20th anniversary of Hurricane Katrina. That's about to be a good one. So make sure y'all pull up to that one as well. Man, this is exciting, man. I'm excited. When y'all getting down here? Y'all gonna be top of the week, or y'all?
Yes, I will be arriving on Monday, and I'll be there for a full week.
Oh yeah, man. Well, we definitely got to connect. This interview was good, man. I know we went a little bit over time, but this is the type of substance that we need to have. We just sit down, chop it up about different things. Like New Orleans is a really powerful piece in this Black economic prosperity initiative that we have. Like New Orleans, we drive a lot of culture. A lot of things come from the city. We have a big diaspora, so New Orleans is pretty much implanted in every Black community. So I think that is really, really important for us to just build these bridges and make these connections, because we do have talent. We have a lot of opportunity down here. We got a lot of people. We just need to have the education. And us having these conversations like this, it just exposes it, lets people know what's going on. And, they have to realize that Essence is more than just, going and having fun at the convention center. We're really out here doing real work. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, man. So I'm gonna stop recording right there. That was